Okay, let's unpack this. Generative AI is, well, it's rapidly becoming a part of everything, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And that definitely includes the games, the learning platforms, the online spaces where children spend their time.
And what's critical to understand, and what the research we're diving into today really points out, is that while children might be the group most profoundly impacted by this technology in the long run, they are currently the least represented voice in the conversations about its design, its deployment, and, well, its governance.
That feels like a massive gap. I mean, how can we build something so powerful that affects an entire generation without truly understanding its impact on them? Or better yet, without asking them.
Exactly.
So that's what this deep dive is all about. We're looking at some fascinating research from the Alan Turing Institute that specifically examined the impacts of generative AI on children.
Yes, and their approach was really comprehensive. They combined large-scale quantitative surveys polling children, parents, carers, teachers across the UK with deep dive qualitative research. That included school-based workshops where they actively engaged with children about their experiences and, their perspectives on AI.
That combination sounds invaluable, getting both the sort of broad strokes and the personal insights.
Definitely.
So our mission today is to really pull out the most important nuggets from this research.
Yeah.
We'll look at how kids are using AI, how it's affecting them, and what the key adults in their lives think. All guided by frameworks focused on children's well-being and rights. We want to bring those crucial insights to the surface, especially the ones directly from the children themselves.
Precisely. Understanding the landscape requires hearing from everyone involved, but too often the voices of children are missed.
All right, let's start with the big picture then, the stuff that came from the surveys.
Yeah.
What do they tell us about AI usage among kids and the adults around them?
Well, the researchers conducted 2 significant online surveys in the UK. One involved 780 children aged 8 to 12 and their parents or carers. The second surveyed over 1,000 teachers working with children from age 1 up to 16. So it's a pretty substantial data set.
And the first headline is usage rates, I guess.
Yeah. Nearly a quarter, 22% of children aged 8-12 in that survey reported they've used generative AI.
Okay, nearly a quarter.
And for those who have, it's not just a one-off experiment. A striking 72% use it at least once a month.
Oh, right, so it's becoming regular for a chunk of them.
Looking at the tools they're using, ChatGPT is the most popular by a significant margin, used by 58% of the kids who use AI.
58%, okay.
Gemini is next at 33%, followed by My AI by Snapchat at 27%.
Who is using these tools seems just as important as how many. Did the data show any interesting demographic splits?
It did, yeah. There's a slight gender difference. 24% of girls reporting usage compared to 19% of boys.
Okay.
But a more pronounced difference emerged among children with additional learning needs. That's children who might need extra support with learning, communication, or social interaction.
Right, ALN.
Yes. So 78% of children with ALN who use generative AI reported using ChatGPT. That's significantly higher than the 53% of their peers without ALN.
Wow, that's a really notable difference for that specific tool. But here's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, raises some big questions about equity right from the start. The major difference based on school time.
This was one of the most striking findings, I think. 52% of children surveyed in private schools reported using generative AI.
52%.
Compared to just 18% in state schools.
Wow. More than double the usage in private schools. Does that difference extend to how often they use it?
Absolutely. Among kids who use it, 72% of private school children are using it several times a week versus only 42% in state schools.
Oh, okay.
And teachers in private schools also reported much higher awareness of student usage, 57% versus 37% in state schools. This data really highlights a potential AI divide mirroring existing access inequalities, and it suggests that while some kids are getting significantly more exposure and potentially building different skills with this tech early on.
That's a critical point for thinking about the future. So moving beyond who's using it, how are the kids actually engaging with these tools? What are they doing?
Well, the main activities, cited by around 43% of users, are creating fun pictures.
Right, the image generation stuff.
Yeah, finding information or learning and just using it for entertainment or, playing around.
Are those uses different for different age groups within that 8-12 range?
Yes, there's a clear pattern. 8-year-olds are primarily focused on entertainment.
Makes sense.
At 9, finding information becomes key. 10-year-olds are really into creating pictures. 11-year-olds use it for a mix of entertainment and information. And by age 12, homework help emerges as the main reported use case.
Okay, so it evolves with age. And what about the children with additional learning needs we mentioned earlier? How does their usage differ?
This is another really significant finding. Children with ALN reported using AI significantly more for communication and connection.
How so?
For instance, 30% use it for playing with friends compared to 19% of their peers without ALN. 39% use it for getting personal advice versus 16%, and 37% for chatting and keeping them company versus 22%. This suggests that AI might be serving a unique, perhaps vital role in expression or social interaction for some children in this group.
That really underscores the potential for positive impact, but also, the need to understand that impact deeply. Switching gears a bit, what did the surveys reveal about how parents and carers feel about their children using generative AI?
Overall, they're surprisingly optimistic, actually. 76% reported positive feelings about their children's use.
76% positive. That's high.
It is. However, this optimism comes with, considerable concern. 82% are worried about exposure to inappropriate information.
Right. Safety.
And 77% are concerned about inaccurate information. The reliability.
So potential is seen, but the content risks are definitely front of mind. What about the classic concern adults have about AI and kids cheating in school?
That's where it gets interesting. Only 41% of parent scarers reported concern about cheating in school.
Only 41%. That seems low compared to the other concerns.
It is quite low compared to their worries about inappropriate or inaccurate content.
That low parent concern about cheating is a fascinating data point, especially, I guess when we look at what teachers think. But before that, let's look at a major concern shared by both parents and teachers. Critical thinking.
Yes, this is a strong point of agreement across the board. 76% of parent scarers and 72% of teachers are concerned children might become too trusting of AI outputs and not think critically about the information they're getting.
That feels like a really foundational skill potentially being impacted. Okay, now to the teachers specifically. How do they feel about students using AI in the classroom or for schoolwork?
It's a mixed bag of views, really. A clear majority of all teachers, surveyed 64%, believe generative AI can be a great tool to support students with additional learning needs.
Okay, so that echoes the potential we saw earlier.
Exactly. However, among teachers aware of students using AI for schoolwork, nearly half think it negatively impacts classwork engagement. That's 49%. And reduces the diversity of student ideas, 48%.
And creativity, that's another big debate point with generative AI, isn't it?
Views on creativity were also divided. Among teachers aware of student AI use for schoolwork, 40% saw a positive impact on creativity, but 43% disagreed.
So pretty split.
Yeah. Looking at all teachers, 45% agreed AI fosters creativity, while 23% disagreed. So, no clear consensus there at all.
Now, back to that cheating number we discussed with parents. What did teachers report on that front?
This finding really stands out, especially in contrast to the parent views. Of teachers aware of students using AI for schoolwork, a significant 57% reported students submitting AI-generated work as their own.
57%, wow.
Yeah, and this rate was even higher in state schools at 60% compared to 47% in private schools.
Wow, okay. So over half of teachers aware of usage are seeing students pass off AI work as their own. That disconnect between parent and teacher concern about cheating is a crucial point the research surfaces. Finally, how do teachers feel about using generative AI themselves for their own professional tasks? Planning, admin, that kind of thing.
Here, the views are much more positive and optimistic. Teachers report high benefits for their own work.
Like what?
Well, 85% said it increased productivity. 88% felt confident using it. 61% trusted the systems they used.
Okay.
0.82% saw a positive impact on their teaching overall, and over 75% felt it improved the quality of their tasks, like lesson planning or creating materials.
So, broadly, teachers seem to be embracing AI for their own work efficiency. They see potential benefits for students with ALN.
Right.
But have significant concerns about broader student use impacting engagement, critical thinking, and, academic integrity. That's a complex picture from the surveys.
It really is. And that's why the second major part of the research is so valuable, getting insights directly from the children.
Right. Shifting gears completely, let's look at what the researchers did in their qualitative workshops. What was their approach to hearing from kids, and what did they find?
Okay, so this part of the research involved workshops over 3 days with 40 children, aged 9-11, in 2 state-funded schools in Scotland.
Okay, smaller group, more in depth.
Exactly. They used creative, rights-based activities to explore AI with the children, which allowed for a much deeper understanding of their perspectives and experiences than, a survey can provide. They used frameworks like RITech to help structure the discussions around children's well-being.
What were some of the key insights and maybe even surprising thoughts that came directly from the children in these workshops?
One notable and perhaps unexpected concern that emerged strongly from the children was about the environmental impacts of generative AI.
Really? Environmental?
Yes. The energy and water required to run these massive systems. Some children actually became hesitant to use AI or even chose not to after learning about this aspect.
That's genuinely surprising, kids thinking about the carbon footprint of AI. That's powerful. What other major themes came up for them?
Trust was a huge theme, particularly concerns about misinformation and disinformation.
Like fake news.
Yeah, basically. The children talked about how difficult it is to tell what's real versus what's AI generated and expressed a desire for clear labels or ways to verify content.
What did they say they wanted to see AI used for in the future? What were their hopes?
They had strong ideas. They preferred AI being used in ways that benefit society and specifically help keep children safe online.
Okay.
And there was a really strong interest in seeing AI develop to support other children, particularly those with additional learning needs.
That aligns perfectly with what the teachers in the survey felt about AI's potential for ALN support. It sounds like the kids were really capable of engaging with these complex ideas.
Absolutely. The research really highlighted the children's competence and their enthusiasm to contribute to shaping AI development and governance. It demonstrated that children actively make choices about when and how they engage with AI, and they are capable of discussing both the potential benefits and risks in a nuanced way.
Was there anything else that stood out about their choices or preferences in those workshops?
Yes, there was an interesting observation about creative activities. When given the choice between using AI tools for creativity and using traditional offline tools like arts and crafts, the children in the workshops often demonstrated a preference for the offline options.
Interesting. So AI wasn't always the go-to for creativity?
Not necessarily. This suggests that children's choices about technology use aren't just about the tech itself, but are influenced by the context, the task, and crucially, the availability of alternatives.
That's a really important point to remember when thinking about integrating AI into schools, for example. It's not always about replacement.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have the broad data from the surveys and the deep insights from the workshops. What happens when you put those two pieces of research together? What does this synthesis tell us?
Well, combining the quantitative and qualitative methods is where the richest insights often emerge, right? The surveys gave us the scale and the statistical picture, the what's exactly, while the workshops provided the depth, the why behind some of those numbers, and brought in perspectives that surveys might miss.
And were there findings that clearly showed up in both parts of the research? Converging evidence?
Yes, definitely. The strong support for generative AI safely supporting children with additional learning needs is a great example.
How so?
The surveys showed children with ALN using AI more for expression, and teachers strongly supporting AI for ALN.
Right.
The workshops reinforced this, with children with ALN particularly enjoying the tools and the other children suggesting AI development specifically for ALN support. That convergence across different methodologies and stakeholders is really powerful.
What else overlapped?
The shared concerns about inappropriate or harmful content. While the workshops didn't deliberately expose children to harmful content, the researchers noted that simple prompts could generate it, which underscores the risk. And the surveys showed incredibly high parent concern, 82%, about exposure to inappropriate information. That concern is valid and, frankly, urgent.
Were there areas where the findings differed, maybe because of the different participants or methods used?
Yes, and these differences also highlight the value of both approaches. For instance, the relationship between experience and attitude towards AI.
Okay.
The survey suggested that having more experience with AI correlated with more positive attitudes, more use, more positive feelings.
Right.
However, in the workshops, some children actually became less positive after engaging with AI, particularly if the outputs didn't reflect their identity or interests.
This sounds like it relates to issues of representation and bias, maybe?
Precisely. The qualitative research, by allowing deeper engagement and observation, highlighted that children of color in the workshops were frustrated by the lack of representation in AI-generated images.
Right, like asking for a picture of a child playing and it always being a certain type.
Exactly that kind of thing. This points directly to issues of bias within the models and underscores the need for more research into how AI impacts diverse groups differently and often inequitably. This kind of nuanced feedback about bias is much harder to capture in a large-scale survey.
And did the equity point show up again in the differences between the survey and workshops?
Yes, the survey data clearly highlighted the access disparity between state and private schools.
We saw that big gap.
Right. The workshops conducted in state schools involved many children with less prior AI knowledge. This naturally shaped their initial engagement and perspectives compared to perhaps more experienced children in the survey's private school group.
So that reinforces the need for equitable access.
Absolutely. Equitable access to the tools and equitable opportunities to learn about them is crucial.
So bringing children into the research wasn't just a token gesture. It uncovered things that adults might not have thought of or that surveys couldn't easily capture.
Exactly. The child-centered approach revealed crucial differences between adult and child perspectives, like the teacher optimism versus student cheating concerns, and showed that children, when given the right information and context, can engage in sophisticated discussions and make informed choices about AI. It really validates the fundamental premise that their voices are essential.
Okay, so based on all these findings, the benefits, the risks, the different perspectives, the nuances captured by talking to kids, what does the research recommend we actually do moving forward? How do we navigate this?
Well, the recommendations are grounded in these findings, acknowledging both the potential for positive impact and the very real concerns. The overarching theme is that generative AI can be beneficial, but only if it's developed and deployed safely, responsibly, and crucially, with the meaningful involvement of children themselves.
So prioritizing child-centered AI and participation is number one, putting kids at the heart of it.
Yes. For policymakers, that means actively seeking and integrating children's perspectives into AI policy. It's not an afterthought.
And for developers,
it means meaningfully engaging children throughout the design, development, and testing process, even for tools not explicitly marketed to kids because, let's face it, they will probably use them.
Good point.
It also calls for creating safe, age-appropriate tools and maybe introducing clear guidance or even some kind of certification for AI tools intended for use in schools.
And building on that finding about ALN support, that seemed really strong.
Definitely. Collaborating directly with children and teachers to develop AI tools specifically designed to support children with additional learning needs is a concrete recommendation given the widespread support and observed potential in this area.
What about creativity and those observations about offline preferences? Does it mean less AI for art?
Not necessarily less, but it means supporting children's diverse forms of play and creativity, both online and offline. When integrating AI in education, ensure it enhances learning and creativity alongside traditional methods, rather than just replacing valuable tactile or offline experiences.
Context matters.
Right. Remember that children's choices are influenced by the environment and the alternatives available.
Improving AI literacy seems absolutely critical, given the concerns about trust and misinformation that the kids themselves raised.
It is fundamental. Recommendations include incorporating explicit education about generative AI, what it is, how it works, safe and ethical use, understanding bias, environmental impact, and academic integrity.
All of that.
All of that. Into school curricula from primary right through secondary levels. They also call for producing clear guidance materials specifically for parents.
And addressing that finding about bias and lack of representation in outputs, that frustration the kids felt.
The recommendation is clear. Ensure AI outputs represent children of diverse backgrounds and experiences, especially in creative and learning contexts. The research showed that lack of representation can be frustrating and impacts engagement, so actively working to improve fairness and inclusivity in AI models is essential.
And closing that equity gap we saw in the survey data between school types.
Yes. Recommendations include government support to help state schools deploy appropriate AI tools and infrastructure, promoting equitable access and preventing that AI divide from widening further, providing free learning resources for schools to help teachers and students understand AI is also key.
And the environmental impacts the kids brought up, which was quite surprising.
Yeah, stemming directly from the children's concerns, a recommendation is for developers and companies to transparently report the environmental impacts of their AI systems to end users.
Make it visible.
Exactly. And to do so using language and metrics that children can actually understand.
Finally, ensuring teachers are supported in using AI responsibly, given their optimism, but also the potential pitfalls.
Right. With many teachers using AI for their own work, Recommendations include developing training and resources to help them understand and use AI safely, ethically, and effectively in educational settings. Considering institutional licenses with clear usage policies, rather than relying solely on personal accounts, is also suggested to ensure compliant and best practice use in schools.
So when we wrap all of this research together, what's the ultimate message this deep dive leaves us with? What should you, the listener, take away?
I think it's a powerful reminder that children are not just passive recipients of generative AI. They are already engaging with it in varied and complex ways, forming nuanced opinions and facing both genuine opportunities and significant risks.
There's that core tension we've seen throughout this research. The incredible potential for benefit, particularly in areas like supporting children with additional learning needs or boosting teacher efficiency, balanced against major shared concerns around safety, accuracy, bias, equity, the impact on critical thinking, and even the environmental footprint.
And crucially, these aren't just adult concerns projected onto kids. The research shows they are concerns shared by children, parents, and teachers alike.
The clear takeaway, then, seems to be the urgent need for everyone, policymakers, industry, educators, parents, to prioritize children's rights and well-being as AI develops.
Absolutely.
To actively bring children into the process of shaping this technology, to improve AI literacy for everyone, and to ensure that access to safe, responsible tools is equitable across the board.
This really raises a fundamental question for all of us, whether we're interacting with this technology directly or simply living in a world it's rapidly changing.
Right. Considering how quickly generative AI is advancing and how profoundly it might shape the future that children will inherit, what responsibility do we all have to ensure these powerful tools are built for and with the next generation rather than simply imposed upon them? It's definitely something to keep thinking about long after our deep dive today ends.
Yeah.